are the things that they learn in school, or some of them are the experiences that they have in terms of the interventions, like their military coming or such other interventions, both direct and indirect intervention. And these are the things that shapes the citizens' knowledge and perceptions of ECOWAS as well. We find a marked difference between elite perceptions on the one hand and those of everyday citizens on the other hand, which reflects variegated exposures to and experiences with the intervention that result from people with different social and political standing as well as geographical location. For instance, in Gambia, those in the, in certain areas where ECOMIC is not stationed, they have a different experience of ECOMIC compared to those that are in Fonyi, those that are accusing the ECOMIC of harassment, of many other issues. And so the geographical location of this force is also counted in terms of people's experiences with regional intervention. And so among the elites, we get into too much debates, but for the ordinary people, they just want peace and the normalcy to continue doing their everyday work, making their own businesses and the like. The third point is ECOWAS interventions are locally more contested, as you can see in terms of the different narratives that we highlighted that often assume they are criticized for being partial, serving ECOWAS interests and not those of the receiving societies, for having hidden agendas, for coming too late, and for not following their own policy norms. So these are things that we saw that ECOWAS interventions are not usually generally acceptable, but they are mostly more contested than are usually assumed. There is also, however, also a notable appreciation of ECOWAS intervention, especially among more marginalized parts of the societies who welcome the restoration of normal life and the prevention of more violence. We also see that despite articulated criticism and disappointment about a poor implementation record and inconsistent application of norms, citizens still count on ECOWAS and articulate far-reaching expectations, especially in the field of conflict prevention, infrastructure, and economic integration. And mostly when you ask them, about ECOWAS and all those things, they tell you about economic integration, free movements of goods and services, which they feel also a very critical part of the broader ECOWAS program. So in terms of the policy implications, we see that local possession shape integration success, that is systematically integrate local possession in ECOWAS policy planning, monitoring and evaluation, especially in ECOWAS missions. And that we recommend that they conduct recurring survey studies on knowledge and local possession of ECOWAS among citizens. This will also help for ECOWAS itself to gauge how citizens are also responding to their interventions. So we say experience is an important tool for promoting ECOWAS and its vision, enhance possibility to experience ECOWAS firsthand through outreach projects and accessible liaison offices as points of contact and interaction. Usually, the only time we hear about ECOWAS is when there is, our citizens will say when there is trouble. But the people want to know what ECOWAS is doing, what they're engaging, and I think at in-country level where ECOWAS have these liaison offices, it is important that those offices engage with the people, telling them to get to know what ECOWAS stands for and what ECOWAS also does. So we say that citizen is not citizen. Our activities should not only stop at the urban areas where you have where it's easy to access people, but it must also go beyond the capital city and take the diversity of lived realities of ECOWAS citizens into account as well. Just for instance, in Banjul, stopping in Banjul and saying, ECOWAS is there, but what about the people in Basse? What about the people in the villages, in our communities? Are they not also citizens of ECOWAS? So their perceptions, their perspectives are also important in these discussions. So we also talk about proactive and continuous communication, and this is manages expectation and prevent misinformation. In the afternoon, early afternoon, somebody was also talking about this. For military intervention in particular, in the case of Gambia, where a clear formulated and communicated mandate is required, including on tax goals, exit strategies, as well as updates on extension and adjustment. Because now, the longer, even though the intervention was welcome, but the longer it stays, people start to believe that it's an occupying force, or it is also serving a different agenda. So it is always important that there is this proactive communication, and so that one, you manage the expectation of citizens, but also prevent the spread of misinformation and disinformation. So we also say the fifth is the consistent norm implementation, because citizens were also saying, why are they in Gambia and they are not in other countries where they also have the same issues, for instance. And so consistent norm implementation is key for public support. Ensure that ECOWAS norms are applied consistently especially those relating to democratic standards and political rights. Because at the end of the day, citizens are also aware of what is going around the sub-region to an extent. So they want to see that these norms and policies are, one rule, rule for one, rule for all. So in this way, I think that will create more, a consistent norm implementation, which I think will give, more hope and address some of the issues that citizens perhaps raise. So thank you. So basically, these were the things that we wanted to share. And, thank you for your attention. And also thank you to Wademos for giving us this opportunity also to share this widely, with other colleagues within the civil society space. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Seth. We will move into the group discussions. We will start to look into the findings and analyze areas that we can also add our voice in terms of the policy recommendations that Seth has put forward from the study. What I realized from the study was that there seems to be misreaction, but largely Ecowas perceptions around these interventions doesn't seem to resonate strongly with the ordinary citizens. There is that consensus in the study that Ecowas is a bit elite-based, and the ordinary people doesn't seem to align or know much about what Ecowas is doing at the grassroots level. And then the general disconnect also seems to run strongly in the study. Citizens' participation and inclusion in ECOWAS interventions is also a major concern from the study. So I want us to go into a bigger, broader conversation by first of all thanking Seth for setting the context and using the Gambian and the Burkina Faso situation to help us to unpack this particular session. So let me invite the panelists. I will be the moderator for the panel session and the plenary session. First one is from there. Okay. So I have here with me Professor David Dose. Prof is the chairperson for Tuna Lapage. Prof, can you join us in front of the session? And then anyway, who is the Deputy Director of Surveys at Afrobarometer. Please, can you join us to have a conversation on citizens' perceptions on ECOWAS interventions in the West African sub-region. And then I will also invite Ambassador Napoleon to also join us for this session, and myself. Thank you very much. So we move forward. expressed concern about it. They asked questions about some of the interventions, telling us that they don't really know about the components or the entire program that the intervention really seeks to achieve. Any idea about even the end date? So they were asking questions about when is the standby force or the deployment going to end and all that. Finally, we also have ECOWAS here. So I will start with my panel by asking them what is your initial impression or assessment of the findings from the study. And then we will go into the specifics to look at some specific interventions. Thank you very much. I'll start with you, David.
Merci, Paul. Et
I'm going to talk about the perception uh, as a Togolese and also a member of the community. I'm going to essentially touch on two different areas so that it would help us bring my perception to bear and as a Togolese citizen and that of a citizen of ECOWAS. So you see, I am going to talk about basically an exception that is void or that is linked to the political situation in my country, and I'm not talking about a perception that is in line or in link with the economy or the better conditions of the citizens or common citizen of my country or in ECOWAS as a whole. 2005, President Yadima on the 5th of in the evening of 5th February 2005, the son of the president introduced his son as the new head of state and taking office immediately. Immediately, there was the reconstitution or re-enacting of the constitution by force, and ECOWAS intervened positively. They were obliged to react on behalf of the populace or the ordinary citizen and brought to bear the consequences of such actions and also put in place an interim uh, authority. But unfortunately, this was still under the control of the state, and in April, the president was inaugurated. So in February, the declaration was taken or announced, and they were asked to organize election in April 2005, and that opened the floodgate for certain massacres that took place. So this continued until 2017, 2018. Now, if you ask the Togolese simple questions about the ECOWAS, and the Togolese has been suppressed and they have bad memories of this institution. And if you give them the opportunity, they will make it clear to you that they want to tell ECOWAS to stay off Togo and don't take Togo through this kind of treatment because they were silent and a lot of things have been done that has caused certain retrogressions in the country, and we are counting over 500,000 people who are dead, and there are thousands who are even unaccounted for. There has been the capturing of people. We've had interventions of people like Obasanjo and even the president of Nigeria at that time who were part of this era. Uh, the uptake of power by election, and we know the result of the outcome. Now, 2017, 2018, where we were really faced with certain serious political crisis, where thousands of the youth were on the street, and ECOWAS, as usual, intervened, and they, in a bid to bring peace, try to lead Togo on the route of democracy, and there's this facilitation with the help of Guinea and Ghana. But we know very well that ECOWAS simply, maybe I beg to say, but they just accepted whatever Togo gave to them, hook, line, and sinker, and irrespective of the different manifestation and demonstration, this new government still took its position. ECOWAS was called and invited by the Togolese populace to come to their aid, crying out to them, but this didn't happen, even though they requested that they come and fortify the existing institutions to make sure that some of these retrogressions do not occur, but it didn't happen. Said ECOWAS did not lead Togo to the reforms that was needed, and I can tell you for a fact that the ordinary citizen seem not to even want to hear of ECOWAS, and that is where we are today. So, in a nutshell, the Togolese citizen, ordinary citizen, is being put in a very tight corner where they are still counting on the community and the institutions of the sub-region to come to their aid. I believe that subsequent discussions will open up to other aspects of this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the two reports are very interesting and very, very interesting. It shows the dynamism in intervening in a volatile situation. One of the challenges facing the sub-region is communicating to the people. And by communicating, I mean, you cannot just wake up, have a heads of state meeting, and then immediately you are intervening, as we saw in the case of Liberia. What is important now is that the ECOWAS Communication Department needs to beef up its work, see to it that it engages civil society groups in any country that it is going to send an intervention force, to get the civil society groups onto each side, to get the population onto each side, and also to take note of popular organizations such as the trade union movement, the women's movement, the students' movement, the youth movement. It is important to get these institutions behind the secretariat, behind ECOWAS, so that those individual groups can tell the story. They will be able to reach out to the population and let the story be known. The media is very critical when intervening, and it is important that we take note of this. I don't know whether in the two reports they did engage the media before, but meeting 350 people is a good intervention point. Another point that we need to look at is that in intervening, you have to have a group of experts to help the leadership that you are putting in. I know for one that when ECOWAS, for example, took President Goodluck Jonathan, as a mediator following the demise of President Kampori. What happened was it that in the case of Mali, Ecowas did not have experts to help their facilitator, to help their media, to help their mediator. And when you don't have experts and you just take a former president or former secretary general or whatever it is, and he or she gets in, it becomes extremely very difficult because history and culture are extremely important in mediation, and more specifically geography. So in the case of Mali, the president only had, the mediator only had his secretary, the protocol officer, and one military officer. When you have such a thing, you don't gain much because ECOWAS should be in a position to recruit or to second some of its seasoned diplomats at the secretariat so that they become advisors to the mediator, so that the mediator just doesn't travel alone. This is something that we realized in Mali, and it created a lot of problems. Also, when you are doing an intervention, you must be very careful to understand the historic challenges, the injustices that brought about this conflict. If you don't do that, you run into problems. So, and also, because if there's a coup and political parties are out of power, what you also need to do is to have a specific window to discuss with the political parties. If you don't have that specific window, and you only come in every 3 months or 4 months to meet them, you don't gain much. For example, in the case of Mali, President Jonathan will come just for 24 hours, 48 hours. You gain very little with this kind of intervention. And more importantly, in a country that has over 150 political parties, and the groupings change from week to week. So this morning there may be 5 groupings. By the time that the president or the mediator is leaving, there will be 3 groupings. So you don't gain much from it. That's the reason why it is important for ECOWAS to have really seasoned diplomats, seasoned mediators like the UN does. And what ECOWAS can also do is to create a list of diplomats, a list of mediators who they can take, be they in the UN or in the African Union or elsewhere, to support their mediation efforts. What I like about the Gambian research is that Gambians were asking, how about us? When are we having our share of ECOWAS in our geographical location? It clearly shows some liking for ECOWAS, and ECOWAS should look at that seriously so that in the long run, when they are having an intervention, they should make sure that the intervention spreads across all the hot spots in the country. Another lesson that we need to learn is that it is high time that ECOWAS establish an endowment fund for intervention. And when I speak of an endowment fund for intervention, I mean putting up some money, saving the money maybe for 5 years and not using it. And from then onwards, when there's an intervention, you use the endowment fund so that we don't have to be relying on the European Union, on the Americans for support. It is time that we begin to find innovative way of intervening in order to manage our conflicts. Chair, let me just add something, which I couldn't do since I was not part of the listing. This is a very great gathering of experienced persons from different backgrounds. Can we see how these experiences can be utilized to help develop robust resource political parties so that they govern in a democratic way, so that we don't have political parties that do not respect human rights, do not respect the laws of procurement, do not respect the constitution. It is important because when I look around, I see a lot that we as civil servants, as civil society organizations, can have an impact on political parties. At the same time, if we don't have good political parties in power, then all the resolutions and the things that we are putting up, who is going to implement them? It is political parties that have to implement them. So we must try and find ways or means of having innovative relationship with the political parties. The same with the civil service. It is civil service and the political parties, they mismanage or manage our country properly. It is when the two sides mismanage that you have coup d'etats. So we have to take all very, very seriously and see to it that we help to make them workable and pro-people. My last point is on the institutional reforms of Ecowas, which we're talking of. It is important that civil society organizations, that we work with our governments to change the way that the presidency, the commissioners, and the rest are elected. We should press for open interviews. We should press for the governments advertising those positions so that many more qualified West Africans can apply and be part and parcel of it. We shouldn't allow only the president or the foreign ministers to be deciding who they should take, who they shouldn't take. We have passed that stage. We have passed that stage. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Whilst we give the microphone to Anyway, I would like you to also reflect the issue of sanctions as one of the intervention mechanisms for ECOWAS. If you look at the situation in the AES countries, one of the reasons that they use as a window for exit was the fact that the sanctions imposed a lot of humanitarian crisis for them, and that ECOWAS was not humanitarian in their approach, was also not considering the community, recognizing the impact and the vulnerabilities that the sanctions really caused the country. So after Anyway, I'll come back to you to also give us your reflections, because the sanctions are found within the protocol on democracy and good governance, that when any government is brought to a closure, or when there's unconstitutional changes of government, or where there is serious violation of human rights, ECOWAS has the mandate to impose sanctions. So Anyway, can we take your initial comments about the study, and also from the perspectives of Afrobarometer, you used to also conduct perceptions around these wrecks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Once again, good afternoon. So I'll just speak to a few points in terms of, I want to also thank you, Said, for the research, and I want to pick it from there in terms of knowledge and understanding about ECOWAS, especially looking at the citizen perception. So I think what your findings ties very well with the Afrobarometer survey findings in 2014. We asked a couple of questions on regional integration, and that also ties about citizens' perception about ECOWAS, their knowledge about AU. So we actually asked knowledge about AU and how helpful the AU has been to citizens, also knowledge about the regional, or the REC. And so our findings, actually, we found that significant proportion, about 30% of citizens actually said that they didn't know about the AU. And looking at the REC, so we would say for West Africa, they were talking about Ecowas. For Southern Africa, they were actually discussing about SADC. And so a huge proportion, 28%, also said they did not know about the regional bodies in their own countries that we are actually operating. I think what's also interesting from these findings, of course, we see a huge gap in terms of citizens that don't know about the existence of these vital regional economic bodies. But we also had to ask questions, do you think they've been helpful, like the way they're operating in your own country or in your own region? We asked citizens to assess their helpfulness. And I think that's really useful to find out that for those that knew about the regional bodies, a majority actually said they've been helpful. And I want to state the statistics. About 69% actually said the AU had been helpful, which is quite, 61% said the AU had been helpful. Only 12% said it never was helpful at all. And so looking at the same question on the regional groupings, 59% said our regional groupings or our regional economic communities have been quite helpful, so meaning ECOWAS for West Africa. And I think when we just had to check across the different regions, we realized that in terms of citizens that said the REC had been helpful in analyzing that across the region, Central Africa actually tops the list, followed up by West Africa. So meaning ECOWAS, so the West African region had in their perception by that time that ECOWAS had actually been helpful, and that was followed by Southern Africa, East Africa, and at the least Northern Africa. I think for me, what I want really also to state is that with this information gap, I think something needs to be done in terms of how do we sensitize the citizens about these regional economic communities. I think something really needs to be done. But also, I would want also to highlight the aspect of media, because our research also found out that those citizens that constantly use the radio or most of the time use the radio had more knowledge about ECOSOC. So it actually ties this, there's a relationship that's very strong between media and also knowledge about this REC. So it actually points to the fact that there is need to really sensitize the communities or even citizens. And media takes a very vital, it's a great instrument that can actually be used to sensitize our communities. It could be the normal, the normal media. It could be also social media. That could be very, very, very helpful. I think what I would also want to mention here is that from our surveys, we also asked a couple of questions about regional integration. And I think I was sitting there and I was asking myself, do citizens feel then that there's no need to help other countries or within countries within their region? Because we asked this question. So questions about regional responsibility to protect democracy and human rights against sovereignty. You know, that's really important, because we found out that majority, 58% actually say if countries are struggling in terms of democracy, slipping, if human rights abuses, rule of law, even within our region, it's important that we leave them. It's important that we protect our sovereignty, because each country should be able to deal with its own issue. And I found that really striking, to a point that I felt like maybe countries also feel that we need to protect our sovereignty. We don't need help. I don't know where we are right now. These were findings in 2014, but that's really striking to see that, you know, some other countries actually believe, or citizens believe, that it's important to protect our sovereignty and allow countries to actually deal with their issues at their own pace. I think one thing that I would also want to highlight when you're looking at ECOSOC with the amount of work that they have done, I think also tying to the issue of how do we connect to citizens. One thing, we are managing a project that has been founded, under funding from the EU. And what it does, it connects civil society organizations with the African Union. The whole issue, I mean, the background is actually because there was this also huge gap between the citizenry and the African Union. And we felt, okay, so how do we make sure that we connect citizens and we connect civil society organization with the AU? So what we have done is actually to make sure that we connect most of the civil society organization that knew not about even the AU. And, you know, in my mind, I felt like probably when we're saying citizens don't know about the ECOWAS, it also starts from some of the civil society organizations. There's a whole lot of civil society organizations that are focusing on democracy and governance, rule of law, but they know very little about ECOSOC, or they've not been able to engage directly with ECOSOC. And it's really important to find that platform where there's connection. I know Wademos is actually doing so great, but we still have something, we might have still a couple of organizations that still needs to be conscientized about the work that ECOSOC is doing. I mean, in some platform, citizens feel that ECOWAS just focus on the political side, and then don't really think about the economic emancipation, you know, the free trade that is allow, you know, citizens within Central Africa, West Africa to move freely across borders. And those are key points that needs to be highlighted. But I felt that we still have a number of even CSO that still needs to be conscientized. And it's important for even ECOWAS to be able to identify amongst even the CSO that have grassroots, that works in community, and being able to work with them, because it then it's easier then for information to cascade from, you know, even within civil society organization to the local communities. I think one thing that I also want just to highlight is the issue of being proactive and not being reactive. And I think that ties very well with the issue of just having to really strengthen ECOWAS, the early warning systems. I think that's really important. ECOWAS has done a lot. Our colleague actually spoke about it, and some of the colleagues here have also done so. But I think where we are right now and some of the problems that we are facing maybe in West Africa is because there is need to really strengthen the early warning system within ECOWAS. Because if there are already red flags, data would show, and some of these findings from organizations will show that these countries, these are early warning signs. And probably for some of our countries, we know very well that this president, this is his last term. We need to start to engage with the president so that they know that they don't even have space to extend their term of limits. So those are things that needs to be done. Make sure that, you know, early warning systems within ECOWAS are strengthened to deal with, you know, insecurity and peace within the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyway, that was a very excellent one. Ambassador Napoleon, if you can help us with the experiences around the sanctions, and then I'll come to Prof. Dose to tell us more about the situation in Togo. How can ECOWAS reconnect strongly to Togolese community, looking at the historical legacies that you shared with us that has made ECOWAS quite unpopular in Togo for some time now. And also with the recent constitutional amendment that took place without a referendum, I'm sure that has also worsened the situation for ECOWAS at the moment. How can we connect strongly with the Togolese situation? Ambassador, over to you, and then we take it from Prof. Dose.
Thank you. In 2021, I had the opportunity to draft a response to the supplementary protocol, how to make it much effective. And one of the things that I suggested was that if political parties misbehave and they are kicked out of power, they should not be allowed to contest for power at the next elections. People found it very, very difficult to accept this. And I said, if you say the military cannot rule and you give power to the political parties and they misbehave and they are taken out, they should also be punished. If you don't punish political parties, you don't punish the corrupt leaders, you have no business punishing the military. Anybody who does wrong should be punished in the sub-region. If we don't have that courage to do that, then democracy will never work. No matter how much information that we have on early warning, the Ecowas Secretariat has produced it, given it to governments. The governments have simply kept it under their tables. Take the case of Guinea-Bissau today. On sanctions, you know, you only use sanctions as a last resort. You must always give diplomacy the space, no matter the difficulties. Between, for example, AES and Ecowas, I argue that give diplomacy the opportunity. We have cross-border activities. We have chiefs, elders, retired diplomats, and so on and so forth. Give them the opportunity. We have strong women's movements across the sub-region. Give them the opportunity to use the small cracks between AES and Ecowas, and we shall go forward. The sanctions that were placed, they were not just for to hurt the leaders. The sanctions never hurt leaders. It is ordinary people who felt it, be it in Niger, in Mali. And anybody who was in Dakar and you cross over from the port and you saw the articulators for goods and that were left to rot, the revenue that the government of Senegal was losing, you ask yourself, those people sitting in Abuja, the authorities of heads of state, do they really understand what sanctions means? It hurt people. And that's the reason why up to today, people are angry about Ecowas. Unfortunately, that's the truth. We need to give diplomacy the space. There was no need in rushing to place sanctions on Niger 1 week after the coup. After the coup. There was no need in placing sanctions on Mali. There was no need because these are already poor countries with poor populations, women and children. And then you sit somewhere in your air conditions and you place sanctions. How do you expect the people to look at Ecowas? And for most of these people, they don't see the authorities of heads of state. They see the commission as Ecowas. They see Abuja as imposing the sanctions. So it was not good in terms of health, in terms of food, and prices of goods and services went up. And literally, people died from it. So that's the anger in the three countries. That's the anger. And it was good that the sanctions were lifted after some time. It created space for dialogue. But the problems that we are talking of, there's an external hand that manipulates the conflicts in West Africa. When you go to meetings, people don't talk of the external hands that manipulate, that push for those sanctions. People don't talk of the terrorist groups Who funds them? Where do they get the monies from? That in the Sahel, who controls the smuggling of the huge business of cigarette smuggling between Southern Europe and the Sahel? Whose interests are these jihadis operating? And why are they exacerbating the local conflicts that our people have? Our people have always lived in a peaceful way. And between various ethnic groups, we have what we call proverbs that says, I'm your slave, you are my slave, we work together, and so on and so forth. And all these things, external forces are exacerbating these things. So we need to look at it. And then for Ecowas, I think that should be the last sanctions that they should ever put up. If you sit somewhere and political parties are corrupt, like we see, for example, in some of these countries, where looting brigades takes over and they do these things. They loot and nobody says anything. So long as you hold elections every 4 or 5 years. Democracy is not elections. It is America Cabral who said that we are not fighting for any ideas in anybody's head. We are fighting for food, shelter, clothing, security, and so on. So the 4-year or 5-year elections should be translated into something that improves the lives of our people. If it doesn't improve the lives of our people, and we are just being told by the Europeans that elections, and we are being told that democracy, we are never being told economic development. We are never been told economic development. We are never been told to add value to our gold, cocoa, coffee, timber, phosphate, lithium. We are not being told. We are not being told. And when we begin to ask that, then they say you are not democratic. You are not this, you are not that. Let me give one example, Chair, and stop. There was a president of Ghana, and his party in the manifesto 24 years ago had a paragraph. And the president and the presidential candidate promised that once he was elected, he will work and Ghana will stop importing poultry. We spend millions in buying dead chicken from France, especially from Spain, and from Britain. It just took one young woman, a young man acting as a high commissioner of one of these countries to pick the phone and to instruct the president when he was elected, don't implement this. So up to today, we spend millions, and all that is helping to make our currency weak. We import billions, we use over 1 billion to import rice from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand, when we have better lands to produce rice than these countries. So I'm just bringing this to the table that the issue of democracy is very tricky. It is the military that developed and industrialized Brazil. It is the military that developed and industrialized Turkey. We need to work with our military to make them science-oriented so that we can use them for road construction, for the bridges, and so on and so forth. If you went to Timbuktu and you saw what the field engineers of Ghana did, you'll be amazed. They transformed that small space, the space that they were in, into a forest. They did so many things that when I walk in front of the mosques in Timbuktu, I felt extremely happy because of the road constructions that they were doing. We have the men and women to rule. But we have to be very, very careful that we don't resort to sanctions, the listing, sanctions, sanctions, and sanctions. The sanctions directly and indirectly led to the creation of the AES. But there is space for dialogue, Chairman. There's real space for dialogue between us and them. And we need to work on it. And civil society groups should intensify the work that you are doing so that we can have dialogue. We are one people. Why should a border, a line be between Senegal and Mali, between Guinea and Mali, between Ghana and Burkina Faso? Why? So let's work together. And this forum is extremely important. Let's come out with innovative things in order to take things forward. I thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Très rapidement sur les sanctions. Je voudrais dire une chose, c'est que si on en vient à évoquer encore la question des...
On the issue of sanctions and how ECOWAS are applying certain policies from France and all that. These are very serious situations because we are experiencing different forms of coup that in some cases ECOWAS didn't even react. They didn't even, and even to the extent that some populace are even accepting the military rule. That is something I think we should look at, and that is what has given reason to, or given rise to this AES exit from the ECOWAS. You see, let us not forget, indeed, ECOWAS is working tirelessly. Some are beneficial and others are not. That is a fact. And sometimes the difficulty is that after the 4-term mandate of, like in the case of Togo, for example, they just decide to just change the constitution at will. And you see, they bring up the presidential mandate and parliamentary mandate. So through ECOWAS and then the Commission, there's been some communication, and they have expressed regret about the situation. And when I say communicate, I'm talking of exchange and then discussions on the constitutional exchange and all that. And ECOWAS quickly deletes its accounts on Twitter, and other social media that they could easily be reached. In fact, it tells that indeed this has affected the perception of ECOWAS in the sub-region and Togo for that matter, because they look at how ECOWAS is responding to the interest of these heads of state at the detriment of the the citizens or people who rather should be supported by the ECOWAS. And I think what is happening in Togo is really dangerous for the ECOWAS, because let's not forget, Togo is the only country that in 2050, I think Ambassador even rightly mentioned, even 2022, there's been some attempts for reforms. In fact, Togo is the only country that has not supported this reform that was attempted by the government. So the issue is this: the ECOWAS wants to look at certain reforms of its directives and other issues. So let's look at it from this angle. The question is, the ordinary citizen is asking, am I going to undergo another reform for the third time? Why? So what is Togo proposing today? They are proposing a new constitution, a constitution that can look at the head of state position portfolio, but rather look at what is in place. One that is nothing but a ceremonial head, and the changes that has been brought on board. What is, we have a head of a council of ministers who has some unlimited powers, and you can imagine someone holding such a position. You see, ECOWAS must come to terms with some of these things. What is happening is really going to be an appetite for other countries that will sign up onto such behavior that will promote some disintegration and bring the work that ECOWAS has done over the years and drag it down the drain, because if ECOWAS does not react to what is happening now, others will want to also take suit. Let me end by saying that yes, we need some reforms. We are even making some advocacies to ensure that we have some reforms, beginning with the term limit for head of state or head of government. Once this said, then we can now look at the new situation and the new Togo that we all hope to see. In fact, we also have to work to ensure that the term limit is specific in the new reforms, and this unlimited or a lifetime position or power that the new government is proposing, we'll make sure that we reject that, because we've come to understand that from the explanation, whether head of government or head of state, they must make sure that they have some term limit. You see, indeed, when we are unable to bring this under control, we are most likely to create some powerful personality that we can't have access to, we can't even touch. You see, I want to bring this food for thought. Indeed, if there has to be a reform, let's not forget that this reform must be of one that is quality, that one that is going to be hard to discourage that unlimited term limit by heads of states, and we need a constitutional reform that also has a democracy in the center of it. I am a democratic citizen, and like my other citizens, other colleagues, we want nothing but the peace, but we want Togo to go through the right reforms that are needed so that these powers that have been given out as a lifetime will have some limit. This is what I want to share. In fact, once again, I want to bring on board that Togo is undergoing certain serious challenges or crises that needs some reforms, that needs the call or everyone to come on board to help Togo to get out of it, and then also to have that reform. And this reform should look at term limits, and we hope that the protocols of the ECOWAS will look at this and discourage other heads of state who also have the desire to extend their term limit. And also, we would all abide by this protocol that will come out from the ECOWAS. Thank you.
The first round and second round of panel conversations to a closure, and then come back to the plenary. There's been a lot of conversations around ECOWAS interventions in Gambia, in Burkina Faso. Gambia following the Yaya Jammeh impasse that ECOWAS had to intervene to ensure the restoration of civilian rule. On the part of Burkina Faso, we have seen interventions that were led by ECOWAS involving mediation and transition, all aimed at the restoration of civilian rule. At this juncture, I want to recognize some colleagues who joined online. We have Habibu Yaya, apologies, from ECOWAS. He works with the ECOWAS Commission. And then we have a co-presenter who did this work with SAIT, in the person of Sophie and Amadou Kabori. We'll be coming back to you very soon to also share your perspectives on the study. So the floor is open. How many of us want to make contribution to the discussion? I see ECOWAS hand up, and certainly and rightly so, because there have been a lot of concerns and issues around your interventions. So let me do as was done by my predecessor, take note of the speakers, and then I'll invite you to the floor. So I have Festus. Fortunately for me, because I'm the coordinator of Wadimos, I know all the faces. So I have Festus, I have Iberi, I have Traore, and I have Indira. Hey, there's a lot of hands. And then my brother from Togo. Let's take the first 5 from here, and then we'll proceed. Thank you. We'll take the first 5, and then we come to the next batch of 5. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you also to the panel for the very insightful discussions. I wanted to highlight 2 points. One is a question to Ambassador. I was happy when he mentioned the creation of an endowment fund for Ecowas, because funding is one of the major challenges of our regional institutions. So I wanted him to provide further information about how this fund will be different from the Peace Fund of ECOWAS, and what should be the source of funding for this endowment fund. Then the second point is about the issue about early warning, strengthening early warning. And, you know, anytime early warning is mentioned, I mean, Mr. Asiedu is here, and he will tell you the information that goes into the early warning data every day. And OneNeb has been supporting ECOWAS over the years, so I know what I'm talking about. The issue is about early response. The data is always there. It's about early response, the political will and commitment of the heads of state to respond to some of the early warning data that is provided. A lot of countries don't want to be on the agenda item of the Mediation and Security Council and even the summit. And so that is the issue. But when it comes to early warning, I can assure you there's a lot of data that is provided. So let's look at the response element of the early warning issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, the panelists, thank you for taking us through. But in all the conversation, I just noticed that there's this big gap between the civil society organizations and the government, and then of course the people also. So I think we should work more with ECOWAS, work also more with the people. We are the ones that will make them understand some of these issues. Government will not, you know, they may understand it and pretend not to, but the more we talk about it, the more we bring the reactions of the people to their knowledge, I think it will help. This is just what I wanted to put across. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, je remercie les panélistes.
Thanks to the panelists. In fact, the discussions show that a lot is expected of the ECOWAS. The ordinary citizen looks up to ECOWAS because they still see ECOWAS as the organization that will come to their rescue. So when it comes to the integration, or just as our panelists said, you see, sometimes there are certain decisions that are taken, but the implementation becomes an issue. There are certain sanctions that are imposed on some countries, but sometimes these sanctions rather do not do good to the ordinary citizen. So I think it has to do it's just a matter of making sure that they maintain their strategic approach. Now, what are the strategic interests that lies in these countries that they are mediating, and then find better ways of handling certain situations so that the ordinary citizens are not affected. And that leads me to the question that has been asked already. How can we harmonize the different interests of member states to ensure that we are promoting democracy among the citizens? Thank you.
Painelistas por esta abordagem. Primeiro, sobre o estudo feito quanto à alteração do poder na Gâmbia e no Burkina Faso. Alô? Agora posso? Sobre o estudo feito quanto à alteração do poder na Gâmbia e no Burkina Faso. Sim, vimos que esta atuação da
We saw the activation of the ECOWAS most of the times because in most of the cases the application of protocols of good governance doesn't benefit the people. So looking at the case of Guinea-Bissau, looking at the cases we have, the ECOWAS is for all of us as our organization, but most of the times we are abandoned. Looking at what's happening in Guinea-Bissau, there are a lot of violations of political will, but we don't receive any help. Looking at the ECOWAS went behind the president, and they did not support the civil societies. And why is this happening? They cannot be respected. All of us know what's happening in Guinea-Bissau right now. The ECOWAS needs to have their own protocol. It's not, we don't only experience military coups. There are constitutional coups as well. And so, what are you thinking about doing in Guinea-Bissau? What does ECOWAS wants to do in Guinea-Bissau at the moment? If all of us are part of ECOWAS, I think we need to change some of the things so that the people can feel that they are part of this organization as well. In the past, you did something in the war of 1998. We established the constitutional order. We were in war, but there was also a violation of the constitution. And so why couldn't ECOWAS participate? All of us here needs to act. Each country have their own problem in different forms, and so this differences needs to be changed. Because if not, we are not creating the ECOWAS of the people. If not, we're creating a ECOWAS of our leaders and not the ECOWAS of the people. Thank you.
Togo. Frère.
Very quickly, let me. I think some of the points have been touched on already, but let me add my. So, talking about the legitimacy of ECOWAS to intervene in certain issues, because I think that when talking about issues of sanctions, and the question is, what evaluation of the crisis has been done in the first place to ensure that if ECOWAS is intervening, they have to ensure that parties to the initial agreement or protocols that have been signed adhere to it. I'm saying this because ECOWAS, there are many states in ECOWAS like Togo, Gambia, where there are certain judicial implication or legal implication that they have to look at. For instance, there are other states that also do not respect some of these protocols, not only those that are in crisis. See, and I think since 2007, there's been a lot of countries that had not respected some of these protocol by ECOWAS. And even though some have not got escalated to civil crisis, but they still need some intervention. However, ECOWAS is not on the ground. ECOWAS is mostly in certain capitals, and they are not. The ordinary citizens do not have access to them, and sometimes they wait until their crisis before you would see them on the ground or trying to bring some mediation on board. You see, the last thing I want to touch about is on the impression that I think we are in a fix now, and there are internal crises at ECOWAS, and these crises are coming from heads of states and governments who form the ECOWAS. The ECOWAS authority, in that there are people or heads of states who want to stay long in power, and for that matter, they also try their best to ensure that whatever they will do to favor them is what they do, and they only bring in ECOWAS as and when they know it will favor them.
Thank you. Hello. Go online, but can we take the next set of 3 or 4 from that row? And then we go to Habibu online to also share his insights. I see Kondo, Wadrago, and then we go to, let's take Asiedu for the last one. We will come back to the panel for a quick response, and then we go online. Thank you. And can you make it very brief? We are running strongly behind time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Musa Kondo from Mali. I work for Sahel Institute. So I want to thank you so much, my colleague Jose from Togo, for really nicely put the point, as he mentioned, historical fact to date. Because for me, Togo played a key role on what's happening in Sahel right now. And sometimes in the conversation, we don't pay a lot of attention, but Togo has been one of the first countries to send support on a private jet to military in Mali when the coup happened. And since then, Togo became the spokespersons of the junta, despite being one of the key members of the ECOWAS, and nothing happened. I think we've all witnessed this during months and years. Second point, now we're seeing a lot of attack in the northern regions of Benin. The same case is started in Mali and Burkina in Niger way before the coup. And now is going under silence. Nothing, even one press release to support Beninese government and said we support, or whatever you may have as a force, and et cetera, et cetera. So now, I've seen a couple of weeks ago, we've seen a lot of fake news going, like a coup happening in Benin, and they were justifying this coup by the multiple attacks happening between Benin and Burkina borders. And still now is a resilient, brilliant silence from ECOWAS. And to just end this line, my colleague from Bissau, she's mentioning a lot of problems they're facing, but nothing happening from the side of CDAO. So I had this conversation with my colleagues during the lunchtime. I think we arrive in the point we all know what's going on in the ECOWAS. Now, the thing is, Togo's still like putting in place, I'm not saying blackmailing, but say, you talk about our internal affairs, we join the IAS. So now it's clear. ECOWAS assume themselves as organization, all they're gonna disappear. Since the morning, we're talking a lot about ECOWAS and the problems and so and so and so. I think the time is no more at mentioning the problems. We always know what the problems are. Now is assuming, taking decision. I give this example to some friends. We know how Texas is unique in the United States with the flags, with all the things. Do you think tomorrow if they decided to remove them from the federal government of the United States, the federal government will say, oh, we take note of what you say? No. They will assume and they will stand the guard. And at a certain point, otherwise we assume who we are, we respect our text by force or we don't. And if we don't, we just let the ones who can assume and move forward. Since, the last 5 years, every single conference and big conference with experts, with everything, we talk about the lack of Ecowas to update, to remove, now we need to focus on solutions, what we have now. What we have now moving forward. Thank you.
Merci. Je vais commencer par jeter un pavé.
Before we begin by bringing to light some issues, how do you put in place an Ecowas of the people, even at the regional or the global level, even at the country level, the people, the local people, the ordinary citizens have no voice? That is where the problem is stemming from. Because no matter the reforms that you bring on board, if at every instance the ordinary citizen's voice doesn't go far or is not heard, then there is no ECOWAS. And secondly, you see, and that's the same as the AES, because AES was created on the pretext that the citizens didn't have a voice and all that, and I'm sure that's another subject for another discussion. In the same way, like Paul said,
de par le passé, puisqu'il y a une perspective.
So yes, certainly there's some historical background to all these issues. We had a president from Burkina Compaoré who didn't do what was expected of him, like in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, and this gave rise to some military intervention by Ecowas and all that. Wheat in Guinea-Bissau, Nigeria in Sierra Leone, and even Compaoré later became a mediator for Mali and all that. And you can see that even aggravated the situation, and today this is where Mali is. My last but one point, with regards to the sanctions, and also in line with the presentation that was done, in 2014, we had some political citizen uprising. ECOWAS did not react. It was in 2015 when the coup d'etat took place, when General Jinje took over, and then that's when ECOWAS came on board, and then I think it was Yayi Boni from Benin and one other heads of state who came on board. That was when ECOWAS came on board with their role, and ECOWAS was felt. Then ECOWAS carried this on until 2022. And after all this, not a single sanction was applied to Burkina Faso. Always the normal suspension for a period. And this was in Mali and in Niger. Now, to terminate or to conclude, I want to come back on what the ambassador said. You see, let's look at the financing of terrorism. Let's be very mindful, because very sensitive areas. We don't need to accuse the external hands, external powers 100%. And just like the doctor said, Dr. sitting beside me rightly said, you see, it talks about the official declarations that really talks about how these terrorists are financed. In fact, certainly we will have external support from France or maybe the Western or maybe even Arab nations and all that, but we have to be very mindful. We need to know really what we are talking about, because when you're talking about terrorist financing, we may not really be touching on the situation or the issue if we are not careful. And my brother here also spoke about the role of France in the Ecowas, mostly with the UMOA, the monetary bloc of the Ecowas. And until Mali exited, in fact, well, Mali has not been with us, I think, since 2000 or maybe about 4 years ago or so. Burkina, Mali, and Niger also just left ECOWAS. But if the West African Monetary Organization was very strong, maybe on top of the list of institutions, then these countries may reconsider their exit. Thank you.
You can take Mr.
That may also clarify some of the issues that are being raised. First of all, I think I'll come to Togo later, but let me deal with anyway, mention ECOSOC and the need for the citizens to have access to ECOSOC. I would want to inform that ECOSOC is not operational yet. ECOSOC West Africa, it's not. We are now trying to establish it, so we don't have ECOSOC West Africa, unless maybe you are referring to ECOSOC AU. But West Africa, we don't have it yet. So that is one information. Then also another one is the strengthening of the early warning, which I think Festus handled that because he's also from the same area. And we all know the challenge has always been early response, not early warning. Early warning data information has always been available, except that the will to respond to them earlier, and also the fact that most member states live in self-denial. They don't accept the fact that these are actually what is happening until they become very big and out of their hands before. But otherwise, early warning has always been around, especially ECOWAS early warning is one of the strongest on the continent. To Ambassador Abdullahi Napoleon, yes, you raised quite a number of issues. I would also want to provide some information regarding that, that maybe could also dispel some of the issues that you raised. I heard you mention the need for the creation of maybe mediation standby team that would help with mediators whilst on ground, similar to what UN has. Indeed, it's something that I worked initially as the head of mediation, facilitation division, before working at now with democracy and good governance. It was part of the initiatives we had wanted to do and put in place. Unfortunately, putting in place a standby team comes at a huge cost. Here are people that you need to pay, like having somebody on retainership who is not working, but needs to make himself available within the shortest possible time as and when the person is needed. And because of that, it's very, very difficult to really have people standing by, waiting to be called upon to support. So we never had that standby team in place. In fact, it's only UN that has it. Whilst they are not working, UN still support them, they pay them. So it is something that it cannot fly, even presenting that as part of a budget to the member states. They will not even buy into that. So unfortunately, we don't have that. What we have is that we have a mediation support unit or division that assist mediators whilst on ground to actually provide the necessary expertise and support. I particularly heard you about the mediation efforts in Mali, the one led by former President Jonathan. Indeed, you are right in saying that oftentimes he comes in and never spends so much time. And because he's also a former president and has quite a number of things to attend to, you can't, usually we don't have him for more than even 4 days. And when he comes, he does his best to meet as many of the stakeholders as possible. But then we also noticed that there were times that he would actually go there because he had also developed this kind of relationship with most of the protagonists. So there are times that he will go there without actually also involving the Ecowas, support team from the head office. So that in itself also created a bit of a challenge. But otherwise, the support team from Ecowas Commission and also from the Ecowas resident rep provide the needed information and the background information that the mediator would need before actually arriving on ground. The reason why whenever he arrives, he would also talk to the ECOWAS, ambassadors in the country to gather certain information that might not be so obvious or he may not have. But when he speaks to them, he's able to add on to that before meeting the stakeholders. The endowment fund, I think Festus also answered that we have the ECOWAS Peace Fund. Unfortunately, that Peace Fund needs to possibly work in a way to garner more funds into the pots, the baskets. For now, it depends only on some percentage of the community levy that comes in that is actually set aside, but that is not enough. Maybe it's about time that the private sector and also other bilateral partners could also specifically contribute to that so that when it comes to intervention, which are often costly, we could leverage on that to support those interventions. Now, the sanctions. I heard about some of the sanctions that you spoke about, and I would want to also inform that Burkina Faso, for instance, never had any sanction. In fact, all the countries had, the only sanctions Burkina Faso had was the political sanction, which is the suspension. The same way AU, they are also under suspension from AU. So Burkina Faso, for instance, never had any sanction. Mali had some sanctions, but those sanctions were removed. Niger, well, one would say that Niger sanctions on hindsight would say was an overkill. Why was it so? Because we've had Mali, followed by Guinea, Burkina Faso twice, and Niger. So it was a situation that was becoming one too many. So the heads of state thought that, this, if you don't do something to stop it or nip it in the bud, it will become an albatross that will be difficult to handle. So one might say that yes, because on that situation, they came at full hawk. But let me also point it out that ECOWAS has instruments, normative instruments, and these normative instruments also have sanctions. That if you do A, B, C, these are the sanctions that all member states have signed to. They all believe in that. And it was the same sanctions that we applied in other member states, and they worked. The reason I was telling you that during my keynote address, it's because of the situation that we find ourselves and the weakness of multilateralism that is making these countries flout flagrantly some of these sanctions. But these are sanctions that have actually existed in our protocols and also in particular most of them were collapsed under the Supplementary Act of 2012. That member states are aware of that. If you do this, these are the sanctions. So then, if there are sanctions there and member states are actually deviating, and we say that, no, we shouldn't put the sanctions, but then in that case, you are saying that you are opening the floodgates for anybody and everybody to flout with impunity. And if you do that, they will not have any organization. That's my fear. So those sanctions are actually there. They are sanctions that member states previously they've actually had those sanctions. And when they went with the sanctions, I mean, after a while, those sanctions were lifted as long as you go by the dictate of what you need to do. So for the sanctions, I guess that's what I would say, because, for lack of time, because initially I had wanted to engage and have more time to explain most of these things. With Togo, briefly, I think to say that ECOWAS hasn't done anything for Togo is really not fair. You would all recall what ECOWAS did way back in 2005, when, with ECOWAS's intervention, the coup was averted after the death of the President Eyadema, and the coup d'etat and the installation of President Faure Gnassingbé. ECOWAS intervened. I remember that time it was Obasanjo, President Obasanjo, who actually came in. I mean, a deal was made and elections were conducted. Subsequent to that, ECOWAS has also engaged, I remember, from 2017 all the way to 2019, making sure that we restore the crisis that had actually, occasion in Togo after President Faure decided to contest when there was a change, a new clause in the constitution to put term limits, and there were agitations that because of the term limit he couldn't, but the argument was that those changes in the constitution were forward-looking, they were not retrospective. So therefore, because of that, ECOWAS actually intervened. And I remember we had two co-mediators. President Akufo-Addo was one with the former president of Guinea, Alpha Condé. And we managed to mediate. What actually happened was that the opposition then decided not to contest. We actually told them that this thing that you are boycotting would come back to haunt you. And because they withdrew, indeed, even those who actually went on independent won more seats, meaning that if the opposition had contested, they would have gained, and that would have given them a foothold. Because they boycotted totally, it's now played into the hands of the ruling regime, you know, and they managed to amass. And it was that made them strengthen their position for the eventual one that actually happened. We know that, for instance, the opposition, one of the opposition leaders, the strongest one, I think Jean Fab, right? In fact, it was him who actually impressed upon the other political parties not to contest, and they also refused to contest. This is an individual whom we are told is more aligned with the current president. Indeed, the mother, if I'm right, if my information is right, the mother was a wife to the former, the late president, meaning that himself and President Faure are step siblings. And this is the opposition, who impresses upon other opposition parties not to actually contest elections. And when his mother died, it was the president that more or less organized the funeral for. So you see the family and familiar this thing that goes into the politics, that also deny others from also contesting, because he's the main opposition leader that actually they know. So Togo's situation, beyond the fact that ECOWAS has done all these things, it's also the case that the citizens have also not helped that much. I believe this was something that I said to you when we met in Abuja. I remember very well that some of these things, we need to have this kind of citizens agency and protest that would actually force the international community to come in. We've had several instances of other citizens agency like Jean Amal in Senegal, Ballet Citoyen in Burkina Faso, Fix the Country in Ghana, Not Too Young to Run, how do you call it, End SACS, and all those things. That kind of galvanize the base. We've never had similar thing in Togo. I may be wrong, but correct me. So when the citizens themselves are not ready to take up the fight, it becomes very difficult for an international organization, given the fact that there's a thin line between intervention and interference with sovereignty. Intervention comes in when there are local hits, and that it opens door for international, organizations to come in and to see how to actually mend. We don't have such a thing. I remember before the elections, we wanted to field, in fact, we fielded a fact-finding mission. And in that fact-finding mission, we had certain individuals. Aline Tin was one of them. And also another lady from Benin. Togolese, government stopped them from coming. We never heard anything from the CSOs in Togo on this. So these are some of the things that are done that if you don't get the cooperation of the citizens, there's very little that one could do. I thought I should provide this information, but in fact, there's a lot to talk about this. Maybe Habib, who is online, might want to add one or two. But this is just information to you. I'm not trying in any way to respond. I'm only providing information for you so that you can place things within the context. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Siedu. I want to go straight online and pick Dr. Habibu Yaya Bapa. Apologies if I didn't do justice to your name. He is the executive assistant to the president of the Ecowas Commission, based in Nigeria, to throw some insights to the conversation and give us other perspectives, especially with the study that was conducted. And then we will go to Sophie and the co-presenter in the person of Amadou to also give us some insights on the study, and then we come to the panelists to wrap up. Time is fast spent. I apologize to colleagues who wanted to contribute to the discussion but are unable to do so. I hope with the permission of the chair, we can continue this perception and experience sharing on ECOWAS interventions tomorrow. So over to you, Dr. Habibu.
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to make some quick points to contribute to the very robust conversation that has been going on. The first point I would like to make collective mandates, the collective aspirations of these countries. And the other extreme now closely is the citizens of the community. So when you talk about ECOWAS, you talk about members three entities I mentioned. For the member states, they have their responsibilities, citizens as well, and also institutions. And I think this discussions we are holding with Wademos is within the framework of the citizens' role in the agenda of ECOWAS. Now, it's very easy to say ECOWAS is this, ECOWAS is that. We should always contextualize it. When it comes to the issue of democracy today, or the issue of peace and security, we have citizens have a role to play when it comes to national conversation, and that's what the minister was mentioning. ECOWAS institutions cannot replace them. And of course, governments, because of ethics of diplomacy and non-interference principles, will not speak up publicly on subjects like that. So citizens have a serious role when it comes to accountability and respect for rules and democratic principles within the every member state. ECOWAS institutions and all the member states can only come consultative. That is a very critical point. And today we are our community, and not ECOWAS as I know, our community is facing serious stress. The fact that democracy has gone through a cycle, and in its practice, it is receding. And that is not the fault of any of other than politicians, let me say, political actors and citizens, where the game is played in a way that it leaves room for improvement. Second point of stress is the violent extremism and terrorism that is shaking the foundation of some of these countries. That the members said that they are desperately looking for, a way out. And again, here, it is the responsibility of everyone to contribute to resolving that. And then we have geopolitics that has set in. All of these things are shaking the board, the region. So all of us have a role to play. It's not the institutions, it's not only the countries, but also citizens. Now, the fact that ECOWAS is able to convene regularly meetings of these countries to discuss issues that are affecting everyone is a very important thing that has contributed to the relative stability and continuity of the community. Because if you look at North Africa, absence of cohesive regional organization has led to the destruction of some of the countries. So we should continue to speak, as stakeholders, not as spectators, and we should always look at the fact that the organization of the community is ours. We have that we have to play each and every one of us. So these are the few points that I just want to add to just help us to defend our own thinking around the whole this thing. It's not us versus them. It's not ECOWAS versus citizens. It's all of us. It's a community issue, and it calls for community action. And I thank Wademos for this very important meeting. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Can we take Amadou, the co-presenter, brief remarks from your side, and then we take from Sophie as well, and we come to the panel here. Do we have Amadou Kabori online? If Amadou is not ready, then we can give the floor to Sophie. And Sophie is part of the research team. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me on the coronavirus. Thank you very much to everyone and to Wademos for and also in respect of the time, I will keep it very
it's time to find solutions of how to do that. And it's there where I would like to point to our findings and also maybe the recommendations again. So if citizens still count on ECOWAS and also want to be heard and incorporated, there's the demand of also being able to interact with the ECOWAS offices on the ground in the member states. And that would be one very concrete point where more interaction between citizens, civil society, and ECOWAS could happen. So with offices being more open to dialogue formats in the different member states. So this is a very concrete example how that could look like to enhance dialogue even before potential political crises are taking place. And maybe also two more expectations that we found in our research is one, the consistency of norm application. So there's a whole range of tools that ECOWAS has, and you mentioned all of them. I mean, it's from sanctions, membership suspension, diplomatic interventions, but also then up to military interventions like we see in the Gambia and Guinea-Bissau. So this whole range is available to ECOWAS, and what citizens also demand is to use those tools consistently. So to come in moments of crisis and when they occur, and not only in specific cases and not in others. So I think this demand is really prevalent. And maybe to add on to end on a last point, I'm currently doing a similar research project in Guinea-Bissau. So that those preliminary findings from there were not included in today's presentation, but if you would like to hear more about that, I'm also happy to engage at a later point about research findings then from Guinea-Bissau. And on that note, I'm ending here. And again, thank you very much. And I wish you a fruitful continuation of the network meeting today and tomorrow.
We will come back to the panelists. I'll start with Prof. Dosé. I'm giving everybody a maximum of 2 minutes each so that we can wrap up for this session. Thank you.
Merci. C'est dommage que M. Ebenezer soit sorti de la...
Thank you. It's unfortunate that Mr. Ebenezer has left us. It's unfortunate that Mr. Ebenezer has left us. I think he needs certain clarification. When we hear Guinea-Bissau and other countries like Togo as well, we can tell that a lot of people are looking up to the ECOWAS. And we are not banking all our hopes on ECOWAS just like that, but we're just saying that ECOWAS must help promote credibility and the confidence that must be once again built in the populace, in the community. Mr. Ebenezer touched on the different regimes of sanctions. These regimes exist, and there are sanctions that are applied to anyone who goes contrary to the laid down rules or regulations, and they must have certain special cases for certain countries and certain special sanctions that are applicable when they break certain rules. In fact, Togo is crying because there is this constitutional review that does not go according to the voice of the people. We have constitutional reforms that gives excessive powers to certain people. These reforms that was done under 2 weeks before the elections. So first of all, the question, what is the protocol on democracy? It says 6 months before elections, these reforms cannot take place. But Togo did not obey this rule, and the question is, what are the sanctions for Togo? Second thing is that we are saying, yes, the CSOs are not implied up to a very large extent. Yes, me myself, For some years back, I was in Ecowas, and I flagged some of these things that are happening in Togo, and I said that Togo is in crisis, and they are calling on Ecowas to come. We participated in this forum. In fact, we organized this forum, and that was at the time where we were forming or trying to put together a roadmap for Togo, and we put everything possible together to help this reform. But this crisis that took place in 2018, the question was, how did ECOWAS even play a role? Even that of 2015, which was earlier, did ECOWAS react, and how did they play a role? How did they come in? I'm saying on authority that when there was some coup d'etat in February, yes, ECOWAS intervened, but the question was, what was the outcome? At the end of the day, what we are trying to prevent took place. Yes, this ECOWAS intervention brought about elections and other, so to say, reforms, but these did not occur the way it was supposed to. It's the same thing for Senegal. I tell you for a fact that even if people in Senegal, even up to 100 people who died, it's because things were not done right. It is not the case that citizens did not play the role or do what they had to do correctly, but rather the institutions failed. In Togo, we're not waiting for the ECOWAS to react or to intervene. No, the issue is, let's just have just a poem, just a simple, just imagine someone who just says for a simple poem that the person was able to bring up or write up. She found herself in prison just because she brought the light, she brought the situation to bear, and that did not sit down well with the government, and today that person is in prison. Mr. Paul, permit me, let me end by saying that it is maybe a very particular aspect, something that is very emotional to me. See, let me start by saying we are talking about ECOWAS. We are talking about lack of confidence and credibility. In fact, there is a lot of work that must be done. I'm saying this on my last point, that when you have a representative from ECOWAS in a country, and at the time he becomes the special envoy of the head of state for this country, then there's some kind of conflict of interest, because they have to sing to the tune of this head of state that is giving them this portfolio. And this is going to lead to a breakdown of institutions. Because sincerely, if people are given the opportunity to talk about this, I tell you for a fact that yes, people will really voice out. And there are serious issues that would have been brought out of these discussions. When the ECOWAS representative becomes the special envoy of that country's heads of state, indeed, there's going to be conflict of interest. And when you are making a lot of demands from the ECOWAS, it's because we are hopeful that the ECOWAS will still come on board and take its rightful position, and that is all what we are requesting, so that they give the institutions the respect, and the local citizens or ordinary citizens will take their right.
How do we really connect citizens with ECOWAS? Something that's really important. A number of people, even from the research findings, that citizens really don't know. We have a significant number or proportion of citizens that do not know about ECOWAS. And how do we then connect them, ECOWAS, with the citizenry? And I think it's important, really, one colleague from online already spoke to this, that there's need really to make ECOWAS more visible. Making sure that they connect with the grassroots, and especially those that are operating in the member states, really to connect with civil society organizations that are also operating in there, and also the general citizenship. I want also to highlight the aspect about policies, knowing the protocols, knowing the resolution, because in some cases, to allow citizens to really engage, they need information, they need data. You'd realize that if you ask citizens if they've either one, they've heard about ECOSOC, or do they even know protocol that aligns with certain issues, maybe rule of law? Do they know resolution that aligns with certain aspect? They may even don't know anything. So just as a pointer to colleagues here that Afrobarometer, through the Data for Governance Alliance project, this is the EU project, actually created a platform that connects, it actually is a data bank that has all the resolutions from AU organization or AU institutions, you know, your OEPRM and PAP. But apart from that, we've also added all resolutions or protocol that are also linked to ECOWAS. And that's really available to any person. It could it be civil society organization, the ordinary citizen as well. And it's also translated, it's not just in English, I'm sure it's translated into about 8 national language. So that's useful, a useful gadget and a useful instrument that can actually be used for a citizen to be able to be informed and know how to engage. And when there are, you know, maybe the member states or government actually are not working in line with what they've signed up to, the citizen can actually engage from that point of view. So it's really important for citizens to also have access to such vital information.
Thank you, Chair. I first went to Ecowas in 1995 from International Alert. We were taking ideas. At that time, the issue of conflict prevention, management, and resolution was just coming up. Fewer people knew about it. We were taking it up and we took it to ECOWAS and finally to the Organization of African Unity, where I went to work. When we are talking about mediation, you cannot mediate when you don't have expert mediators. We didn't have a single expert mediator attached to President Jonathan. And I'm speaking as the chair of the local ECOWAS monitoring committee in Mali. I'm not speaking from somewhere. I'm saying that's the reality that I've had for 4 years in that country. So this is what we need mediators and we need experts. If you don't have the experts, what do? You ask the UN. The UN has a list. The UN will always support us. This is what I'm saying. 2, on sanctions, if you have the protocols, including the supplementary protocol on good governance and so on and so forth, did we apply it to Ouattara when he went his 3rd term? Do you think that the rest of West Africa, they didn't see it? Did we apply it? Are we applying it as he's preparing for his 4th term? Did we apply it in Togo's term? Did we apply it when my uncle Alpha Conde was doing it in Guinea-Conakry? Did we apply it? This is double standards, to say the least. We must have one standard for everything. If you don't have this same standard, the organization will gradually die, like the East African community did. We love ECOWAS more than any other person, and we are speaking because we want ECOWAS to grow and to work to make the West African project a reality. What is the West African project? It was done by military rulers in 1975. It is to bring prosperity to the region. The region is endowed with everything. So this is what we are saying. The endowment, thank you very much for the comment. I really appreciate it. Thank you. What we are saying about the endowment is that desperate situations need newer and innovative ideas. The Peace Fund is not enough. As you and anybody engaged, we know it. But we can look for other sources of resources to establish an endowment fund that will be kept away for 5 years. It will grow, and we'll begin to use it to do certain things that we cannot do right now because everything needs money. And how do we do it? We have mining companies that are looting West Africa. Mining companies. We don't even know how much oil and gas that is taken away from West Africa. We don't know about gold because in some countries they take concentrates. So they just take the whole soils, they go. We don't know. We have to sit up and see how much can we get from those mining companies, from those trading companies to give to Ecowas to set up the endowment fund so that Ecowas can stand on its own and defend the region and defend the people and bring about good governance. And democratic governance is meaningless unless it is linked to the industrialization of West Africa. Look at the youth. Somebody today made a remark which is very serious, that I think it was Asiedu, that the youth, they follow the military governments because they don't know what happened in the past. Are we saying that our youth are so dumb that they don't understand the difference between democracy and military regimes? We must be very, very serious. Millions of people are unemployed in this region. It's a time bomb. It's a time bomb. When you walk in any capital city in West Africa, it's a time bomb. The recent elections in Ghana, the aftermath of the elections, demonstrated the fragility of the so-called 5 countries that are democratic, where mob violence became the order of the day. And I believe that the Ecowas early warning system had touched on that. But because we are all cowards, nobody can give it to the president and tell him that this is it. So you must have what? Early action. We can't. We fear them. They are think gods. And that's the reason why the countries are going down. My last point is that we need to sit up and think innovatively. How can we work to bring the AES countries and Ecowas closer and somehow come back together and, if possible, will behave like Museveni, Nyerere, and the Kenyan president, how they brought back East Africa. You know, East African community was destroyed by Idi Amin, but they brought it back and included Rwanda, Burundi, and even the DR Congo and I think South Sudan. This is the kind of innovative thing that we need to sit down to think and act. This cannot be done by the leaders. It is we, civil society organizations, because we have the time and energy to think of innovative way of governance. CDD, Ghana, once wrote a speech for a minister several years ago, 22 years ago. When the minister read it, the country was, so a minister can make such a good speech? Eh? The speech was written by CDD, and it touched on the issues that brought the country closer. By one, every month, or was it every month, you used to have breakfast meetings. Breakfast meetings with the Chief Justice, with the Minister for Internal Affairs, and so on and so forth. They came to eat together, to talk together, to discuss the problems of Ghana. And that is how they manage the cracks that were in the country. So diplomacy must be given the chance. ECOWAS Commission, please look at it critically and help, particularly with the special summit that you are going to organize. Yeah. Don't let it just be another summit of the leaders coming to talk. Invite this group to do a presentation to the leadership. Invite this group to do it, and you will see how it may help prick some of the leaders. Arab Moy, when we started working on small arms in Africa, we went to do a presentation in Nairobi, and when the opening ceremony finished, the foreign minister went and told Arab Moy, Mr. President, please, can you leave now? We are finished. And Arab Moy said, this is a new thing. I too, I want to learn, so that when you, the ministers, you come and you are not telling me the truth, I will know. This is what we now need in West Africa. I thank you very much.
Thank you, panelists and participants. Once again, I want to apologize. There were a lot of hands, but you agree with me that time is fast spent. This is a very exciting conversation, and I think it's at the cross of the subject of ECOWAS reform. ECOWAS can only reform when it's able to take stock of the feedback and comments that community citizens have on its interventions in the region. But let me conclude with the point that we recognize the relevance of the ECOWAS structures. You have the ECOWAS institutions, you have the authority of heads of state, and then you have community citizens. We all agree here that there is a yawning gap in the current infrastructural mechanisms within the ECOWAS system, and that is the role of citizens. We have over-elaborated this point, and I'm happy that Dr. Habib was able to really clarify and define the roles of all these institutions and structures. But until we institutionalize the voice and agency of citizens in ECOWAS affairs, the expectations that we seek to demand from citizens may not get the needed recognition and mileage within the power structures and the foundations of ECOWAS. We cannot still continue to rely only on the Commission. We cannot rely only on the ECOWAS Parliament. We know the frustration and the limitations of the Parliament. We know the frustration with the ECOWAS Court. The only institution and organ that can amplify and be the voice for the Commission, which we all know sometimes take its instructions and authority directly from the authority of heads of states. And the authority of heads of states are mostly not in sync with the community citizens' aspirations and expectations. It's only when we all push the agenda for this institutionalization that we can really work together strategically to anchor the future of ECOWAS. I want to thank you all. The conversation, as I said, has been exciting. We spoke about sanctions. We spoke about ECOWAS early warning mechanisms. And for here, I want to indicate that if the political will is lacking and the response is weak from the ECOWAS institutions like the Authority of Heads of States, the Mediation and Security Councils, how do we rally or mobilize citizens around the early warning system and mechanism so that we can also use it as a powerful tool for our advocacy, for our activism, and for our engagement and convening. And that becomes another buffer for demanding action and response from our authorities. So I thank you all. I thank Seth. Apologies, Seth. We couldn't give you a lot of time, but I think we did justice to the presentation. We thank the Peace Research Institute based in Frankfurt, the German Research Foundation for funding this particular study. The research has been published and they are all online. I encourage colleagues to have access to the online publications. We will share them with you, and at your free time, I think you can dive deeper into the full strength of the publication. I thank my panelists for this session, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. And I'll hand over to the chairperson for the Wademos annual convening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The time is already far spent, and I want to say that, yes, far spent as it is, it's really purposeful. It's provided very robust ideas on how to get forward or move forward. But one thing that I want to underscore before I declare the meeting closed for today is the fact that we've had this lengthy it's possible for Ecowas, the civil society and the citizens, or let's say Ecowas and its structures, the civil society and the citizens to work together. All is not lost, and if we all agree on this, it means that regular engagement will actually produce the kind of desired results that we want. And like I often tell people, there is no loser in a winning game, just as there is no winner in a losing game. So we're all going to be going down together, or we both rise to live and see the development that we are yearning for in this sub-region. So to that extent, the conversation is going to continue, whether at the informal meetings like this, or at the level of at the level of the corridor discussion. We are never going to give up, because in my local palace, I mean, where I was raised in my small community, we do say that you do not say because the hand is rotten, you decide to amputate it yourself. So we are not going to push all these away, but we are going to continue the conversation until we see a well-developed and peaceful West Africa that we can all be proud of, that also can take us and give us the best of life that we all desire. So by, do I say, the powers given to me to chair this meeting, I want to thank you all and congratulate you all for the robust conversation. Let's set the discussion rolling everywhere we go, like the MTN. I don't know if MTN also go to everywhere in Nigeria, in Ghana, and I think in the entire Africa, MTN goes to everywhere. Let's continue to take these issues seriously and find a way to uplift our region. Thank you. I'm happy to declare this closed.